So for this video, we're going to be making some budget-friendly changes to the Hlaalu Schemes premade deck. Now, quick preface to the rest of the video. I've already done one of these, and it was based on the Daggis premade deck, and after watching it back, I really disliked the format and how the flow of that went, so we're going to update this format, and we're also going to just do a quick reminder on how I'm building these and the constraints that I'm working with. So first and foremost, we're going to start by taking out cards from the list. Then I'm going to throw in the suggestions so that you can see what you should take out, what should go in. There will be explanations. And then at the end of that, I'm going to also play a game so that you can kind of see how the deck performs in action. As far as the constraints go, the only thing that we are adding are going to be commons and rares from pack-based sets. So we're talking core set, Heroes of Skyrim, Houses of Morrowind. If it's not from those, we are not going to include it, with a couple of small exceptions, those being any epics that you may have received from completing the normal campaign. So basically like the tutorial. Other than that, if it's part of like Forgotten Hero Collection, Madhouse Collection, any of the story modes, we're not going to include them in this deck building process because this is meant to be budget friendly. Obviously, if you own those cards, you can feel free to include them. There's some fantastic stuff there, but this is meant for, you know, if you've just started the game, you've completed essentially the tutorial, and you've bought a pre-made, what should you do from there? This is your starting point. So with those reminders out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into building this deck. So right out of the gate, we're going to be taking a look at a lot of the zero cost cards in this deck, and to be honest, we're just going to be removing them. This deck runs a fair number of zero cost cards because the rest of the pre-made utilizes a lot of the plot mechanic, and zero cost cards are a great way to activate that. However, there's not a lot of synergy with many of these cards, and without us having a purpose to run some of these, they're just kind of dead weight. We'd much rather just play quality cards and then rely on the plot to trigger naturally through play, or play things that we actually want to find. So Bushwhack goes, Dress Spy goes, Improvised Weapon goes, both the Bargains and the Guardsman. So we are left with just the Curse. Curse is fantastic, and there are some other cards that interact with it, so we're going to keep that. Next up, Glass Greaves. While kind of cool, because you can't choose the cost reduction, and because it's only a +1/+1, and we don't have a lot of other item synergy, we're going to go ahead and pull that. Moon Sugar Smuggler, because it's Last Gasp, it's kind of hard to effectively trigger often in this, so those are going to go as well. Shadow Shift we're going to go ahead and keep because it is a great low-cost card that provides utility and it replaces itself, so this is a very plot-friendly card. Belmora Puppeteer we are going to keep. However, the Crassius Favor, because we don't run a ton of token strategies, it's going to end up being pulled. We do run some that we are going to add in later, but the Crassius Favor isn't necessarily what we have in mind. Dwemer Puzzle Box is just not really what we're looking for here. However, Fighters Guild Recruit still really solid. Finish Off could be solid, but we're actually going to pull this in favor of some other stuff. Skulks Stay In. Those are going to find our curses, and they are fantastic. Ornery Kagudi is not necessarily bad, but it does not have a lot of like great synergy with the rest of what we're trying to do. So we're actually going to pull this because there's just better 2-drops we're going to include. Stand Watch, while the draw a card is nice because it's something that you can play and it replaces itself in trigger plot, it's just not good enough to make the cut, so we are in fact going to cut that. Pawnbroker is going to stay. It's at worst a 2/3 for 2 if you absolutely need to play it on curve, but otherwise playing a 2/3 that you get some free value out of is fine. Now, we pulled out a bunch of the zero cost cards, but if this is a body that generates it for you, then that's a lot better, even if it is randomized. Thieves Guild Recruit, again, unlike the Prophecy we just pulled away, this replaces itself but is a body, so this is significantly better. We're going to keep it. Corner Club Gambler, we're actually going to keep. 3 for a 4/3 body is fine, and if you get to play this and you have to discard a card, hopefully you're maybe pitching something from the Pawnbroker or something else that's not necessarily a problem, and then you can, get the card draw. I've also been playing around with this, and if you play this with an empty hand, you don't have to discard, but it still will draw 2 cards at the beginning, so leaving this in as a what of is fine. The Smuggler, however, is going to come out. It does have some pretty solid synergy with Shadow Shift, but we're just going to include some better stuff later on, so this is coming out. Haunted Manor stays, it's great. The Oathman is fantastic. In fact, the Hlaalu Oathman might be my favorite of the Oathman, because what it does for the Hlaalu house and archetype is, in my opinion, better than any of the other Oathmen. Sharpshooter is like an Earthbone Spinner, and Earthbone Spinner is fantastic. This one does require plot to trigger, but again, since it's a budget build, we'll take what we can get. Canton Smith we're going to keep. If you have the plot, this is basically a 3-cost 4/4, so that's great. Gatekeeper stays, we like it. Raiding Party is going to stay. The Pilgrim, however, we are going to remove. While tutoring for something like Manor or Puppeteer is nice, the 3-cost 1/1 body is just not very great. Racketeer, though I'm a fan in plenty of builds, is not going to be something that makes the cut here. Similarly, while we are utilizing a lot of the plot stuff, this is pretty mediocre without plot, so we're going to go ahead and cut the Twin Lamps. Might come as a shock, even though this is an epic, we are going to cut this and actually not include this. In all honesty, this is really only useful if you can play it and have it trade and survive. If you can do that, then you essentially create 2-for-1 value. Otherwise, you're much better off if you do want to run something that costs 4 and is going to essentially charge and act as a removal. You'd rather just run like Territorial Viper there. So we are going to go ahead and cut this. It's just not very good for us. Similarly, Torval Crook, great because you can play it, maybe get the Pilfer, gain some Magicka, but we don't have a lot of the really cool combo pieces because we are building on a budget to utilize with this, so this is going to go. Writ of Execution is simply too slow. The completed contract is very nice, but paying 4 and then still having to wait a turn to kill something is really bad, so we're going to outright cut them. Essentially what we're going to kind of do is, as you'll see as we go through, is kind of turn this into like a mid-range deck with a couple of cool synergistic combos. But a lot of the budget builds benefit from either being very aggressive or very just kind of mid-rangey because you don't have card quality, so you have to kind of focus on doing the best you can on curve and making use of the cards that you do have. So Tong Heavy is going to stay. The Bodyguard, however, is not good enough to make the cut, so it goes. The Duke, while not being great in a limited card pool, is probably good enough to make the cut, so we're going to keep it. The Kwama Queen, however, because we don't have other things to really trigger with it, is actually going to get cut. I know it's shocking that we're cutting so many epics out of a budget build, but that's the world we live in. And then lastly, we have Solarest Marshal and Nixox. Nixox is great. If you're watching this video in the future, it's so great it's probably going to get a nerf. But as of right now, for this deck, it's a solid body. It really helps us with the plot synergies. Solarest Marshal, however, relies on us getting a little bit more value out of Marshal. Like, Marshal, in my opinion, is just best played when it's played in multiples. And obviously you have to have the health lead. And if I'm going to run a 6-drop health lead card, I'd rather run Triumphant Jarl. So Marshal's actually not going to make the cut here. So that is what we are going to remove. So not quite half the deck, but a pretty good chunk of the deck that we removed. However, the stuff that we are going to stick in, again, is all very budget friendly, very easy to craft, and you may have a good chunk of it from story mode stuff. So with the removals out of the way, now let's go over what we're going to put into the deck. Okay, so let's start with the zeros. So we already have 1 curse. We're going to go ahead and add 2 more. Also, if I have them, I'm going to add the cards that we add in as premiums because I got some feedback on the last video and people seemed to like me doing that because then they could easily identify what was being added in. For some of the newer cards, I may not have them in premium, so I apologize, but when I'm capable of it, we're going to try to do that. So we're going to put in 2 more curses. because it is one of, if not the best zero cost card in the game, and our Goblin Skulk loves to find them for free. It's also a great way to trigger plot, and it's a great way to trigger a couple of other cards that we're going to add later. So Curse goes in. Then we're going to go to the 1-drop slot, and we're going to go ahead and add in Steel Scimitar. This card is very underrated. It's basically Strength's version of Firebolt. While Firebolt can target things in the Shadow Lane and do fun stuff like that, Steel Scimitar, as long as you have a body on the board, means you can use it to trade up and have your stuff survive. You can use it as extra reach to push damage towards the face. Being a 1-cost card means it's very plot friendly and you're going to get some pretty good value out of it. So Steel Scimitar, big fan, that's going to go ahead and go in. Then we're going to go to our 2s. We're going to add another copy of Balmora Puppeteer because we're already running 2, and again, plot is kind of the theme. Now, it might be tempting, if you have the Puppeteer, to hold it until you have like 3 or 4 cards you can play and then get this massive like 2-cost, you know, 5/5 or 6/6. But I just want to tell you, it's entirely okay to play the Puppeteer as like a 2-cost 3/3. Like, just playing a Curse or, you know, a Shadow Shift or something and then dropping this, a 2-cost 3/3 is really good stats. You're entirely getting your money's worth out of this card at that point. Everything else is just gravy. So just kind of keep that in mind. You don't have to go all in on the Puppeteer. Also, while we're in the 2s, we're going to go ahead and round out some of the other cards that the deck comes with. We're going to go with another Fighters Guild Recruit because it's a fantastic prophecy, and while we are going to play this mid-rangey, it's just a good quality card. Similarly, Goblin Skulk is our friend because we want to find those curses. Goblin Skulk may be the best 2-drop in the game, period. It's just that good. It's a must-answer kind of card. Staying in the 2-drops, we're going to also add 3 Orc Clan Captains. Most of our 2-drops don't have very high power. So Orc Clan Captain, if we've got, you know, a couple of our 2-drops on the board, you can drop this and use them to either push additional damage or help you trade up. So you can get some extra value if you're trying to make those value trades. Similarly, Orc Clan Captain is going to work really well with like Raiding Party, and we're going to add some more of those later. So while we don't have a ton of token synergy, which is why we removed the Cassius Favor earlier, this card is great kind of all the way around. Similarly, in that same vein, and while we're talking about 2-drops, 5th Legion Trainer, we're going to go ahead and stick in 3 of those as well. 5th Legion Trainer, kind of the same idea as Orc Clan Captain, gives you a lot of value out of the 2-drops you do have, but also this is one of those cards that just needs to be answered. It is susceptible to execute, but the 3 health means it does survive against things like Firebolt, etc. Even there's a lot of like 2-drops that it doesn't necessarily die if they run into it right away. It's annoying. If you've ever played against it, I don't know how else to put it. It's just annoying. It's a fantastic card, so we're going to go ahead and throw them in. We are also going to add 1 more Pawnbroker, just because we do want to play a little bit with the theme of the deck. It is a plot-based deck. I don't have one in Premium, so sorry about that one, gang, but there you have it. So 1 more Pawnbroker. Now, moving through the list, we'd love to add more Manners, and if you end up playing this and you like this deck, then this is a high-value craft later, as you'll find out. When you do get this and it sticks, it's very, very powerful. But that's not on our budget list today, so sadly no. Hlaalu Oathman, however, definitely stays. Sharpshooter stays. This stays. Morkel Gatekeeper, we are going to add some more of as well. Here we go. It's a fantastic prophecy. It, again, buffs things. Just good all-around card. Raiding Party, we're going to go ahead and go up to 3 of those as well. Moving on, we're also going to go add some 4-drops. So we want to stick in some Ayla's Huntsmates. It's a quality 4-drop. It lets us draw cards. With so many cheap things, it's really important that we cycle to keep things moving. We're also going to add some Candle Hearth Brawlers, because all of our 2-drops and some of our 3-drops are kind of small, so something with guard does allow us to protect our small bodies, because as charge we can get some pretty favorable trades. And then still in the same vein, we're also going to add 2 more Hive Defenders, because again, big quality body helps protect our other stuff. Moonmoth Castellan, it's like pseudo card draw. So a 4/3 for 4 isn't bad, but it isn't great. But because of the plot, putting a random guard into your hand, we're going to go ahead and keep that. That's entirely fine. Tongue Heavy we're going to keep. We're also going to jump to the 5-drops. Now we're going to add 3 Cliff Racers. This is just a safe card to craft. You will use Cliff Racer a lot throughout your Legends career. So base set card, if you don't own them, feel free to craft them. It's just that good. Now, we're also going to add 1 Divine Fervor, because if you've played through the tutorial, essentially, you do get 1 Divine Fervor for free. So while it's an epic, this should be something that everybody has in their collection as long as you have completed the base campaign mode. Similarly, we are going to add 1 Leaf Lurker, because you should own 1 Leaf Lurker if you have completed that mode as well. We're also going to add 1 more Piercing Javelin, because it's a sweet common, but it's also a fantastic card, and we want them. We are going to add in 1 Quinroll Burglar, because again, if you have completed your story mode and you have leveled up, like this is a card that you get, but as you progress through your levels, you'll get to level up Quinroll Burglar. It's not a great card, but it is a fantastic tool for an early player with a small collection. You will end up cutting this. I know early in the Legends career, everybody looks at this card and they see, you know, big swings from the drain. You know, being able to make it jump to an 8/8 feels fantastic, but it's just not as good in practice as it looks on paper. But again, for now, with a limited collection, it's a fantastic card to include. Another card that you get to level up as you progress through your career is Wild Beastcaller. I think it's just like a Wild Spriggan or something like that until it levels up. But we're going to include 1 Wild Beastcaller because you should have that in your collection as well. And then we took out the Marshal earlier, but I was talking about Triumphant Jarl. I think Triumphant Jarl fits this deck far better than the alternative. And just kind of paying attention here, like I said, we're going to build this kind of mid-rangey, and you can kind of see as it's going that it's going to have this nice curve to it, and there you have it. That's it, right? Lots of 2-drops, but that's because of the plot mechanics. And then a good healthy number of 3-drops, 4-drops, 5. It's got a nice curve to it. Again, we're going to kind of play it like a mid-range deck. So now we're going to take this list and jump into a game so we can kind of show you how it plays and hopefully get some good results. Alright, here we go with our modified Hlaalu Schemes premade deck. We are going to be matched up against a Battle Mage. Actually, this looks like a pretty good starting hand. We're going to be matched up with a Battle Mage right out of the gate. They are going second, so they have the ring. We're going first, but we're going to keep this because if we lead off with the Trainer, the following turn, as long as this survives, we can play a Scimitar, which would then trigger the plot from this. So we have a nice solid curve. It would also then give this the +1/+0 from the Trainer. And if we do end up playing a bunch of cheap stuff early and empty our hand, as I said during the creation, Corner Club Gambler here does in fact, well actually, no, that doesn't change what we want to do. Let's go ahead and still play the Trainer. But what we're going to do, we're actually going to put a curse here because unless they have an item that will keep this from attacking, and this only gains cover when it attacks. So if they don't, basically if they don't have an item here to continue attacking, we'll be able to kill this. Well, sadly they just drew an item. So it was worth a shot. But we can go ahead and scimitar up. And then we have to decide, do we want to play the puppeteer or the pawnbroker? We're going to play the broker and hope for a suppress. We did not find a suppress.
You can't defeat me.
But we're going to go ahead and do that as well. Now we could have held it and it would have been a nice free trigger for the puppeteer the following turn, but we kind of wanted to put a body in the way here. Because this prospector, if left unchecked, is problematic. We're going to go ahead and attack first before we play anything. And so now we have a decision to make. So we can play this as a 2/2 and get a 0 cost card, or we can play this as a base 2/3 with no 0 cost and then get a 3/3. One gives us more stats, one gives us the chance at a high roll. I feel like giving ourselves a chance at a high roll is more important, because if we could get something like suppress to silence this, that's a really big deal for us. So even though it's not necessarily awesome to play this way,
If you want to talk business, you come to the right place.
actually, so normally this isn't that great, but because we have the 5th Legion, we're going to go ahead and do it. Now our hand is mostly gone, and that's traditionally a problem, but again, because we have the Corner Club Gambler, if we draw like a 2-drop or something next turn, we can empty our hand and then potentially get 2 cards out of this without having to discard.
Mine, back off.
Let's see your fighting stance. Let's make the ancestors proud.
Alright, so sadly we did not get something cheap to play with that, but we can now use the Javelin here, and then again still try to get some draw from that the following turn. We're going to go ahead and attack first, just because if they hit a nasty prophecy, we want to be able to respond with the Javelin. They did not, however, so we are going to go ahead and Javelin that, because we suspect that they've got items. In fact, we know the Battlefield Scrounger got an item, but they've got a fistful of cards. We want them to have to play a creature and then play an item, like so. So this is going to end up with an item and get guard. But we can still continue a lot of pressure over here as a result. Not ideal, because again, we can't pair it with our Gambler, but we can play it and then break this rune, which will allow us to draw another card and buff the Huntmate. So we're going to go ahead and attack with this. We're going to go ahead and play it here. Again, we want to do this stuff first because we want the triggers from this. And next up, we're going to go ahead and swing with this, which gives us a card. A little bit sad that it wasn't a 2-drop that we could play. And then we pass. So we've done a great job of pressuring our opponent so far. That's going to get a mace and a spear. Mace will shackle here, but we certainly have enough to threaten lethal. And even taking it a step further, this can give us +2/+2 on something if necessary. But we're just going to go ahead and swing, because without a prophecy, we have lethal. If they did have something that stopped one of these, then we could scimitar the other one. He probably thinks I'm VMing, and that is not the case. I'm trying to explain. But yeah, the Canton, because we could play Hive Defender, would also then get the plot. So we had a lot of ways to generate lethal. That's the deck in action. Hopefully this helped you. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, may you walk on warm sands.